modern technology.
There we go. Okay. All right. I had it on the wrong page. Okay, when we talk about the early elements of building a community, we're going to deal with everything from openness, diversity, elderly housing, which was one of Bob's early goals, schools, churches, childcare, community centers that are supposed to be in each of the village centers. As you remember, Bob wanted 7 village centers in Reston. The setup of a library, where the museum is today, used to be a library, a branch. We're going to talk about the arts and various volunteer organizations. And so Bob set the framework and the structure for the community to develop over time. And communities cannot be designed or planned in detail. So the goal is not to plan this thing from the top down, but from the bottom up. They grow naturally over time. No one person can make it happen. The key is interaction. The key is connecting with each other and forming the different associations and organizations it takes to meet the needs of the community. We mentioned Carol a second ago. Carol and Jane met in Richmond, and we're going to spend quite a bit of time on Jane tonight. And Jane had never really heard about Reston much or understood what it was. She said, you got to take a look at this. So she hooked up with Bob. Bob called her in. They interviewed. And it was obvious that Jane wanted to be part of this. So we're going to talk a lot about Jane tonight. The other people we're going to talk about are Embry, Rucker, and Priscilla Ames, and what they did out of the common ground. This is the Jasmine restaurant today. But back then, it was the common ground, and it was a coffee shop. And Embry, who was the Episcopal rector here, ran his little office out of a broom closet and basically had a little seed money to help people get started when they came in and said, what about this or what about that? And he would encourage them. And he didn't want anybody to leave without having something to go with. So he always gave people encouragement and then something to get them, help them get started. We're going to briefly mention the 2 foundations, the Common Ground Foundation, which Embry used and Priscilla used to help fund some of our early organizations, and then the Reston Foundation that was set up by a generous gift from Bob in the very beginning to try to fund things like the arts and other things like that. Concerts at Lake Anne, so there's a picture of 2 different venues. Lank, wish Tom Campster was here because he was the architect that designed the current building that Lank is in, Lake Anne Nursery and Kindergarten. But childcare became very important. Lynn's going to be talking a lot about that. What's that? Huh, because I got a document that, no, okay, I stand corrected, my mistake. Okay. Jane was involved in everything, from working with the county to build the schools. The Ford Foundation helped with the development of the Lake Anne Elementary School. And we're going to be talking about the Reston Players, the Reston Chorale, the orchestra, the different venues for art. And Bob, again, wanted each village center to have some of this. This is a play, well, this is a play that was the very first play, and I don't have a picture of the barn, but there was a barn, and the stable, I mean, it's not the barn, it was a stable. But they used that for the very first play, original play called The Greatest Game in Town. So that was done. in the 60s. And then in the 70s, here's a picture of everybody that was involved in Anything Goes. Okay? So Ron and Pat Taylor are going to talk a little bit about that. Right before Bob was relieved by golf and sent back to New York, Lady Bird Johnson, President Johnson's wife, came out and met with Bob and Jane, and they're taking a tour of Reston, and just notice the number of kids. It's kind of like the Pied Piper, you know. All these kids are following. You can tell the Secret Service agents. But unlike today, you could walk a little bit freer back then. But that was in July of '67. And then I wanted to close with this comment or a quote from Bowling Alone, which is the collapse and the revival of community. The sense of community is a feeling members have of belonging, especially belonging to something bigger than themselves. That members matter one to another, and that the group, they matter to each other and to the group. And a shared faith that the members' needs will be met through commitment to be together, that we're more important and we're the most important when we are connected. And so the idea is becoming part of a group, as opposed to separation, isolation, selfishness, aloneness, disconnected from friends, neighbors, and social structures, which is a result oftentimes back then of suburban sprawl.